Minimalists.
So my partner and I both have worked in the wedding industry. He's in catering and I've done hair for weddings before. We've both said that if we were ever going to get married, we wouldn't want a normal wedding and we don't need to be legally married. I really like what you guys have said about that. And for us, we'd prefer to spend whatever money family wants to dedicate or give to us to traveling internationally together because it's a passion of both of ours. But at some point, we might want to have a party for our families just to, have our families all meet one day and hang out and celebrate us. How could we incorporate minimalist practices into this kind of celebration? And is this something that you guys have, even though you didn't have a normal or a legal marriage or wedding?
Ryan, if you don't have a legal marriage, is it an illegal marriage?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, let's talk about our stance on this real quick, because I think this question is ultimately about language, the language that we use. So she used a few words here. She talked about instead of having a wedding, she wants to have a party. Well, we already identified a wedding is just a party.
Right.
And so whatever vernacular you're going to use to describe the ceremonial event that represents the marriage, although we have already acknowledged that a wedding is not a marriage, and you can have the best wedding and the worst marriage, and vice versa, or they can both be great, or they could both be terrible, I suppose, if that's an option there. So let's talk about our situation, because when she says you're not legally married, like I didn't have a religious ceremony because I don't belong to a particular religious tradition that would require that, and I don't like the government's involvement in marriage personally. And so I'm at this weird intersection where I don't need, and by the way, the government being involved in marriage is a relatively new thing. George Washington was married, but he wasn't married by the government.
Right.
And yet he still had a marriage, right? He just didn't have to go down to the courthouse and fill out a piece of paper. So when Ryan and I use the term, spouse or wife or marriage, what we're using is a term that describes the type of relationship that we have. It's a long-term partnership, a long-term commitment. Now, commitment is not birthed out of a piece of paper. We can go sign a piece of paper right now and then go cheat on the person the next day. And I don't mean cheat just in the physical sense, but cheat in all the, we can lie to them, we could steal from them, we could hide things from them. These are all different ways to sort of cheat a relationship. And so because of the religious aspect and the governmental aspect, I don't have a formal piece of paper. I actually have pieces of paper that mean a lot more to our relationship. And Ryan, you do as well. But I mentioned a moment ago life insurance. To me, that's far more important than having some sort of marriage certificate.
Such a sexy topic too, life insurance.
I know, right? Yeah. It's like, in fact, because these things are so unsexy, we almost never talk to them, talk to our significant other about the most important things.
So important.
And so I have 20-year term life insurance. Ryan has the same. And that means, and it's 10 times my annual income. And so it's about $100 a month and maybe a little bit less. And what that means is if I die in the next 20 years, then Bex and Ella aren't going to be out on the street trying to figure out how they're going to get their next meal or pay their rent or whatever. And I think that is, to me, one sign of commitment that has nothing to do with just signing a piece of paper. But real commitment is birthed from our everyday actions. And so I think that's why this is so appealing to someone like Amber, because too often what we do is we say, I'm going to have this ceremony that represents something, and it can be beautiful. But then we say, well, that was that. I guess I'm committed for life now. But real commitment doesn't look like that. Yeah. It's more of a verb where we have to commit every day to that person, because otherwise we're in that relationship out of some sort of pious sense of obligation, and no one feels good about being in an obligatory relationship.
Yeah. Absolutely. And also, I think deriving a sense of your identity out of that relationship or being married, I think is something that a lot of people can relate to as well. So,
I think that's fascinating, because that identity, the reason Ryan and I use that language is these are sounds that we make with our mouth. We say husband, wife, whatever, but like it means something to someone else. It's a shortcut to describe the essence of our relationship, but it doesn't describe the totality of the relationship. Bex and I were having this exercise the other day when she asked me to explain something. She's like, well, I need you to explain it better. And I said, well, try to explain why you love me. Right? Mm-hmm. And
are you a words of affirmation person?
No. Really, what I was trying to explain to her is that you can't. You can only use language. Only goes so far.
Yeah.
And so she could say, well, I love you because you're 6'2", and I really like your hair, and I think you have a handsome face, and I like your biceps.
She likes looking at
I like your biceps.
It's like you could name 12, 3 things,
yeah.
But then say you have 3 things. There are millions of people who fit that 36 item criteria.
Yeah.
And so it's not the essence. I mean, it's not the totality, rather, of our relationship. You can't describe love with a series of checklists. In just the same way we can't describe a marriage. So what we do is we do our best to use language as a shortcut to communicate with other people. So if it's helpful for people in this different setting, I could say my partner. I call Ella my daughter. She's my stepdaughter, but I call her my daughter because I raise her or help raise her. And all of that is just language to help explain to other people the essence of that thing.
Yeah. I like the idea she has here, Amber has, of having a party. Mariah and I have actually thought about doing something like this, just bringing the families together.
And you're all invited if you're a Patreon supporter.
Exactly. Only the VIPs are invited.
Well, on Zoom, they can all attend from anywhere.
Yes, that's what we'll do. A Zoom party.
300 patrons just unsubscribe.
That would be that would be super affordable.
You
I
guys
imagine.
would be surprised at how meaningful and heartfelt it is to watch people on Zoom though getting married. I've attended a couple now. So.
I've attended a couple things on Zoom, like a cocktail party, a magic show, just a couple things that it was a pretty awesome substitute for the real thing. I think I still prefer the face-to-face interaction.
Sure.
But okay, so when it comes to this minimalist party, you tell me, Jessica, if this is the way to approach it. I would think if it was Mariah and her and I would decide first off, like, what can we afford? So let's say our budget's $5,000, and then we would start to work our way backwards from what that budget is. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think it's important to kind of have a drop dead number of I don't want to spend more than this. And it should be based on what you can realistically afford, whether it's what's in your savings account right now or what you can save up in the time between now and when the event is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, thinking through the big things, like how many people are going to attend, and the venue is going to be the biggest things you kind of need to figure out to see if you're going to be able to accomplish what you want to on the budget that you have.
Yeah. I was in Pasadena, and there's this Ritz-Carlton there. And for the ballroom, for the wedding room, it's like 6 figures to rent this room out.
For a room.
Yeah. You just mentioned the venue, made me think about that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But
you've seen some really lavish weddings, I'm sure, in your line of work. What are some of the most ridiculous things that you see people spend money on? I
mean, it's hard to talk about without not sounding super judgmental about it, but I am kind of a little bit about just the over extravagance. But I would say the craziest things I've heard of people doing are things like, the champagne fountains or personalized everything where guests get gift bags full of stuff when they arrive. It's wonderful if you have the money for that sort of thing. Absolutely do it. I don't begrudge anybody who actually has the money to spend and that's how they choose to spend it. More power to you, in theory. But
as long as they're doing it with intention,
right?
Not just spending money for the sake. Well, I'm going to spend $1 million on this wedding,
right?
Right. It should be on things that you value and that are meaningful to you and should come from a place of heartfelt generosity and not obligation, kind of like what you said before.
Yeah. Amber, I really love the idea that you are trying to live an unconventional life, and that's why you're asking these questions. You're asking the right questions for the right reasons. Living an unconventional life in the face of the status quo. And the status quo is what? To go $35,000 into debt to have this wedding that you're not going to enjoy, and the people who go there don't want to enjoy either.
But the champagne fountain.
And
gotta have it.
Yeah, and so I really like that you're asking these questions. I'm going to send you a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. It is really about these two guys, me and Ryan, who started questioning the status quo, living an unconventional life, which really just means an intentional life, because intentional, especially these days, is unconventional. So let's send you a copy of Everything That Remains. If you like our podcast, you'll like the audiobook version of Everything That Remains. It's my favorite thing that we've ever written. But also, if you don't want the audiobook, we're happy to send you the book or the ebook version of Everything That Remains.